Yo, what is going on YouTube? I am Germ here. Today I want to talk a little bit about G2 and a pretty crazy story about them. This isn't like breaking news, this isn't brand new. This is actually from, I want to say a couple weeks ago, maybe even a month or two ago at this point, but it is revolving around Flockhead, and he has been a very, very interesting player over the past couple of months and really throughout all of 2022, but even into last season as well. Now, if you guys do remember, there was the whole drama last year with the Mad Lions like owner or whatever the guy ended up being. I don't even remember what the truth was at this point, but there was all this different speculation of who this guy even was. But the guy involved with Mad Lions, who last year at certain points, I think it was at Worlds, was wanting Flockhead to actually be starting over Carzzy, which, you know, people thought was crazy, people thought was laughable, and it was this whole kind of controversy drama. Carzzy gets mad, they end up going back and forth, and then Flockhead ends up going to G2. He ends up leaving Mad Lions, he ends up replacing Reckless, which was crazy and got them all kinds of criticism from tons of people. Some people were really excited about Flockhead, but a lot of people were questionable about it, and I think rightfully so. I was definitely, and now an LEC championship and a decent showing, but a kind of tragic ending to an MSI showing later. I still think it's fair to have a lot of questions about Flockhead, but also he's done some cool things so far. So that's where this story is going to start today. Dating back to when Flockhead got signed to G2 or announced that G2 was considering him or about to sign him or whatever, this is one of the most interesting tweets coming out of it all, and a really, really funny tweet, especially looking back now. This is Rich's Wrath. This guy, the founder of H2K, obviously H2K, not really as relevant anymore these days, or I don't even know if they're still an org, but that's how this guy kind of came up in popularity. He said, 80 carries I would inquire about before talking with Flockhead for LEC in no order. And then he starts out, you know, with a bunch of like real 80 carries, like top kind of ERL 80 carries, like Jack Spectra, Lucker, Comp, Bean, Xmatty, Hansama, Neon, Exekit, Carzzy, Sven, Patrick, Kabe, Attila, start to get a little bit more funny, Reckless, Rafita, Doublelift, Unforgiven, and then Actual Forgiven. So the tweet ends up being pretty funny, you know, ends up being kind of a meme, but he's also being serious. He's like, you know, where is this Flockhead stuff coming from? Why is Carlos going after this guy? There was obviously some talk about, you know, Carlos going with the Spaniard and stuff like that, and it was just kind of weird because this guy was, one, replacing Reckless, which is already crazy. You have crazy high expectations. This is a guy from the ERLs that not a lot of people were familiar with. He wasn't like one of the top ERL prospects. He wasn't a guy that had, you know, dominated EU Masters or won EU Masters, and I believe he hadn't even ever made it to EU Masters. So you'd only seen him against other kind of Spanish competition in the Spanish league, I believe. And yeah, people were just really questioning this move. And you know, he followed this up with some other tweets. Like, I do agree that Flockhead probably played some trials and looked very good in these games, and he was probably sweating for his life as he should be against random opponents who are there during their time off as a favor and don't give a fuck. And then he also says that, hey, this tweet is pure conjecture, but it's the only way I can see how this happened. And yeah, you know, we heard the stories last year during Worlds where G2 was scrimming against some of the teams at Worlds, and they were doing really, really well. They were beating some of those teams, so they had high expectations for Flockhead and coming into 2022. Obviously, then, like I said, G2 ends up winning the title. They end up going to MSI, knocking off T1 in a game, knocking off RNG in a game. They look like they might be one of the best teams in the world. Flockhead had a couple of good games. He had some really nice Kaiser performances. He started popping off. You know, the second game that they won where he was on Kalista obviously didn't look so great. And overall, I would say Flockhead had a kind of disappointing MSI. There's some people saying, hey, it's his first international tournament ever, so he's just trying to learn from it. He had some good moments, and I think that's fair. But if what, you know, Carlos is saying that he wants his team to be competing for world titles and to be one of the best teams in the world, in that context, Flockhead's performance was definitely you know, left a lot to be desired. But maybe headed off towards Worlds, maybe the next couple of years, he will be a guy who can consistently put up those performances. But that gets us to what I want to talk about today. These tweets from Thorin. These are from April 11, 2022, so about 2 months ago. This is right after G2 actually won the LEC title, or right around that time, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after. Obviously, a lot of us are blocked by Thorin, so not everyone gets to see his tweets, and that's one reason why I think it's interesting to cover them in videos, because, hey, getting some... he says some interesting stuff. He's got some interesting stories. He does have a lot of insider information. He has a good relationship with huge people in the scene, like Perks, like Carlos, some of these guys, and he says, this is his tweet, me, G2, could have signed Viper. Plebs, nah, he would never leave EDG. Me, they said he was open to joining Pleb. No, an LEC team can never outspend an LPL team. Me, okay, mate. You live in your reality and fuck off out of mine. Hashtag fan logic in the classic kind of Thorin tone, the Thorin way of talking or whatever. Kind of funny, kind of weird. But at the end of the day, the content is what is kind of the craziest stuff here. And then he went on to tweet more about this, and Carlos ended up responding to some of this stuff as well. Thorin says, so many idiots who have no understanding of the transfer market are convinced that Viper could never have joined G2. And then I don't have these, but Carlos, I believe here, but for sure somewhere ends up going on to respond of like, hey, we have one of the best scouting departments in the world or whatever. We have an amazing scouting team. I trust them. They make amazing decisions, all that stuff. And obviously this is new staff that G2 had brought in because they kind of cleaned house last year. And Carlos was really just trusting them to make these decisions. But this is crazy. This is insane. This means that Viper, 21 years old, I believe he is the Flockhead, I think, just turned 20. Flockhead either just turned 20 or just turned 21. So they're very, very similar age. I'll scroll down so you guys can see this. Yes, Viper is 21. This is obviously the 80 carry for EDG, who just won Worlds. We can see that here coming off that Game 5 World Championship victory over Damwon Kia. But obviously, in this year in the LPL, they haven't done so great, so we didn't get to see them at MSI once again, so people maybe forget about them a little bit. But last year, going into Worlds, Viper was considered to maybe be one of the best players in the world, to probably be the best AD carry in the world, and they end up obviously winning the title in the LPL in the summer. They end up winning the World Championship, and then apparently, he was considered for the G2 team, and apparently had some interest, and was a very, very real option to join the team. And from the story that Thorin and Carlos seem to be telling, it's almost like Viper wanted to join, and they chose Flockhead over him. And again, that makes this whole thing even crazier. The Flockhead story is already insane. He is already a guy, a relative unknown who is replacing Rekkles, one of the best and most accomplished Western AD carries of all time. But if he was also chosen over Viper, that is pretty crazy. And in some ways, it's good because we have seen over the past couple of splits and the past couple of years that, the stories like the modern League of Legends is going away from the super team, and it's going more towards the teams that actually synergize, that actually fit together, that can actually play well together. And it's not just about having the 5 most talented players, because it would be hard to argue that Flockhead is just more talented than Viper. It would be hard to argue maybe even that Flockhead is just more talented than Rekkles. Rekkles was a guy who won the Spring Split MVP in 2021. And G2 looked really, really good with him at times, just not at the right times, not in the playoffs, but through the regular seasons, they still looked really good. But what Rekkles and G2 didn't have was synergy. They weren't on the same page. They couldn't play well together. So it seems like Carlos and G2, I'm not sure if they just saw something in Flockhead that said he could be as good, if not better than Viper, if he was just a more talented player individually, or if they took a look at a lot of these things like, hey, cultural difference, team environment differences, language barriers, all this stuff, and said, hey, even though Flockhead might be worse, he is better for our team. Or maybe it was a combination of both. I'm not really sure. But the fact that G2, at least potentially, but maybe even certainly, chose Flockhead over Rekkles, over Viper, and then he ends up bringing them an LEC title in his first split, ends up going to MSI, knocking off T1, knocking off RNG, I think is a really, really crazy story, and I think it's pretty cool, and I just wanted to get this information out to you guys and tell this story, again, because yes, Thorin's very popular, he's huge, but also a lot of his stuff flies under the radar because of his, kind of social media antics and blocking everybody and all that stuff. But at the same time, so far, obviously the decision to bring in Flockhead has worked out pretty well, but I do not think that one LEC title at the end of the day is anything to celebrate all that much. It's really, really cool, and congrats to Flockhead. That's amazing for him in his first split. But G2 bringing in Flockhead and the Flockhead era for G2 and choosing him over all these other players is going to ultimately be defined by, are they able to win multiple LEC titles? Are they able to rack up a ton of titles? And then at the end of the day, he is always going to be judged by his international success. G2 as Carlos says, is a team that's built for international success. They are trying to win MSI titles. They are trying to really ultimately win world titles and be that first Western organization in the modern day of League of Legends to win a world championship. And obviously G2's been there before, going to a world final. They seemed semi-close at MSI, looking for a couple of days like they were potentially the best team in the world. And like I said, I don't think Flockhead is at that level yet, because even when we look at the LEC coming in the summer split, where does Flockhead rank in terms of LEC AD carries? He's not the best. Is he top 2, top 3? Is he top 4, top 5? I don't know. Is Flockhead better than Carzzy? Is Flockhead better than, would you take Flockhead over Comp right now? Would you take Flockhead over, just, obviously, you're probably not taking him over Upset. There's just a lot of, the LEC has a lot of good AD carries already, but again, I don't think Flockhead individually has been all that great. Yeah, he has had good moments. He has had flashes of greatness, but he's not really been consistently great in the LEC season, in the LEC playoffs, or at MSI. So, is he just part of a great team? Is he actually a great player? Is he really going to work out in the long run? Or would G2 maybe have been better off with a guy like Viper on their team? I don't know. But either way, just a crazy decision made by G2. And also just pretty crazy to hear that they potentially could have had this guy on their roster, especially coming off a world championship. And it's not like he was not a very, very big part of winning that world championship. But that is pretty much everybody's video today, guys. Definitely drop a like if you did enjoy it. I would appreciate that so much. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about this story. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. Subscribe, stay up to date on all my latest content. Hope to catch you guys in the next one. But until then, peace.